Max Porterfield, President and CEO of Callinex Mines, and really excited to be here again.
Max, thanks for the introduction. Good to see you. You've been travelling around a bit. What have your movements been?
Well, we recently had a number of site visits out to our Pine Bay project in northern Manitoba, where we have our rainbow discoveries, Pine Bay, Alchemist Descendant, and actually had the Premier of Manitoba come out on site, which is really quite nice to have her spend some time with our team, better understand our project and what we're on to with the discoveries at Pine Bay. In addition, we also had a bit of an honoring for one of the members of our team, Mike Maslowski, who's a 2011 inductee into the Canadian Mining Hall of Fame. They unveiled the bust of Mike in the town center, really to honoring the over a dozen discoveries that went on to producing mines for that community. So that was quite a pleasure to be part of.
Was there kind of a big ceremony, beer was taken and party poppers popped? A few balloons?
Yeah, no, it was a surprise for Mike, so he was certainly surprised, and then after that we had a dinner with some members of the community as well as his old-time friends, so it was nice.
Okay.
We headed off to Beaver Creek for meetings.
In Manitoba, what was the message from the Premier? What was she saying? I mean, I know politicians have to speak in bland generalities, but was there any specific that she said?
Well, it's just continue to be supportive of our property and the project team and everything that we've accomplished to date, and really where we're headed going towards the future. I think job creation is a real key point for any policymaker, particularly going to an election cycle. So it's great to see her support. The Manitoba government has been supportive of our property and everything we're on to. We received 2 grants to date. More recently, actually, we received a $500,000 grant from the Manitoba Mineral Development Fund. And that fund's set up specifically to help companies accelerate, discoveries that have potential to create jobs in northern Manitoba, which is known for mining. And this is kind of with the mindset that they need to help support new mines coming online in northern Manitoba with, the likes of 777 shutting down and the job losses that were coming from that experience.
$500,000 isn't, it doesn't go very far in a drill program, but I guess it helps, and I think you can allocate it towards. I don't know. How do you plan to allocate something like that? That'll
be allocated towards what we're already doing for our exploration campaign. I mean, it isn't like a huge sum of money, but certainly, every little bit counts. In one hole, as you know, can change the trajectory of an exploration campaign, a property, the whole works. So we are very grateful for that. Certainly would love to see more, but are going to turn away the generous grant that they have provided to us.
No, indeed not. And then you said you went on to Beaver Creek, the Precious Metals Summit. What was the mood there?
I mean, from our perspective, I was pretty excited. So, I mean, we just come out from the site visit where we actually got to see our brand new discovery, Descendant. So I was in a bit of a buzz personally and had a lot of exciting things to share with investors. So to that end, I mean, that was a pretty upbeat conference. I think the mood was probably more like negative slanted overall, just in terms of where the market is. But I think that in terms of years past, if we've had a bad market, I think people have shrugged these bad markets off a little bit easier than years past. So there's a bit of optimism in that. Maybe just got used to it. Depends on how you look at it, but no, it was a successful conference from our standpoint.
How many meetings a day did you have? I mean, was it quite a busy schedule?
Yeah, we had an excess of 40 meetings plus a presentation, and of course dinner, and then chatting outside of that. So no, it was great interest from institutional investors to corporates to a few high net worth that were also attending the conference. So as far as conferences come, I would say it was one of the best conferences that they've ever had, and I hold their conference and their organization in very high regard.
Good. And of course, the news that you were talking about was you put a drill hole into Descendant. When I last spoke to you, which was probably 3 months ago, you were talking about a 10,000 meter drilling program, which is going to be spread across a number of deposits, including Alchemist and Rainbow. Kind of your existing resources or existing kind of discoveries, because Alchemist isn't in the resource category yet. And Pine Bay, but you also said that you were going to drill Cabin and North Star, and so where in the process did this kind of hole underneath cabin come from?
Well, in terms of, we've got a long history. I mean, the explorers have had a long history on that area of the property. That's one of the reasons this gets its name Descendant. But it actually goes back to 1919, where the earliest exploration at the Pine Bay Project, as you know it today, began. The second exploration company that actually ever explored the property was in 1929, when it was Callinex Mines, our predecessor company, actually sank shaft over at the Baker Patent deposit, which is adjacent to Cabot. And the reason all these years, dozens of exploration companies have taken their shot at finding the mine over in that area of the property is because, first of all, Pine Bay encompasses the largest felsic volcanic rock package in the entire Flin Flon greenstone belt. And the felsics of the host rock to over 90% of the ore ever mined in the camp's history. And right over this specific area of the property is a huge alteration system that spans at least 700 by 1100 meters. And alteration systems are really kind of one of the key indicators for the size of the volcanic event. That's where all the fluids flow through that rock and brought those minerals to surface. So, the bigger the alteration system, typically the bigger the correlated deposit, because the bigger the alteration system, the bigger the volcanic event associated to that mineralizing event. So Placido, for example, was the last explorer that truly spent a lot of time on the property between 1990 and 1993. Had opined for a 30 million ton exploration target on this specific area of the property, and they continued to recommend drilling in that area of the property a bit to the south in their last kind of update or report on the property before leaving in 1993. And truly, with the exception of Inmet, who had over a 20 million ton exploration target to follow up with a couple of holes to the south, no follow-up was done until we took over the property. We took over in 2014 in terms of the renewed focus to the Pine Bay property. The property had been in the company's portfolio since 2009. And we had, in one of the first exploration campaigns in 2016, we deepened a historic Placido hole 38 meters. And when we did that, we intersected 10.3 meters of 6% zinc, 0.7 copper, 1.8 gram per ton gold, 0.7% copper, and a 2-ounce silver. And so truly high-grade contact mineralization that was pyrite hosted. We followed up that drill hole in 2016 and went underneath it. With the effects of drill holes, weren't able to replicate it. And one of the last holes of that exploration in that area, we hit 2.4 meters across 3% copper equivalent to the south. And we did a quick follow-up, and I can show you a long section, probably be easier, but that didn't prove out when we try to see correlation between them. But that was, again, under the interpretation that these deposits would be sitting a bit differently underground. So based upon the work that we've done in the discoveries of Rainbow and Alchemist, we had a reinterpretation on the cabin horizon in that area of the property. And that's when we did a significant step up 375 meters vertically below that last intersection I mentioned to you, hole 24. And that's where we hit the 27 meters of mass sulfides across 67 meter interval. And those four lenses that we discovered, namely the Descendant, are preceded by a very significant alteration package that you could see at surface, of course, but downhole it was looking beautiful. I mean, we're coming into blebs and wisp of chalcopyrite, even from a couple hundred meters away from the intersection. And in terms of mineralogy, the breakup of the minerals in this is similar to the top of the rainbow. So within the system, you typically have more zinc when you're more distal from the vent source, the main heat source in a VMS deposit. And so to hit that zinc and significant gold credits as well this indicates that we're the distal part of the system, and the vector would be down the plunge line at depth. And that's been always the thesis for every exploration company that went to that property, is that you have a large mass of sulfides a deposit preserved at depth. And so we're very excited about the discovery. In terms of the precious metals content, we're consistently hitting over half a gram, 0.7, 0.9 gram per ton gold, which is, almost double or near double really what you see in terms of your gold grades at Rainbow, for example. On the Rainbow resource, which we also put out since we last spoke, the resource grade on Rainbow is 0.34 gram per ton gold. So it is a higher precious metals content in this system. In terms of moving forward, we have aggressive plans for step-out drilling, which is, commencing immediately.
You had spoken about a 20,000 meter drill program for the year, which you were going to do in 2 bites. The first bite being 10,000 meters. Has that now been done?
Oh yeah, so we concluded it was roughly 8,500 meters. And then we're going to renew the second phase. The second phase of exploration is going to be 5,000 meters exclusively at Descendant. And then that should set, at least one big parent hole, probably about 200 meters vertically below the discovery hole, and then allow for a number of wedges off of that new parent hole as well as the discovery hole. And that's something we're very successful at in terms of drilling out Rainbow, and even, we'll plan on doing it at Alchemist at some point in the future, is, setting these parent holes and then wedging a number of wedges off of them to get a number of cuts and save a lot of meters.
And is that step down of 200 meters, is that driven by the signals you're getting on downhole EM? I mean, is it downhole geophysics which is telling you that the next best place to look is 200 meters below?
Well, certainly we have downhole EM. We've run 2 surveys on downhole EM on that, so we'll utilize that data in aiding us for vectoring as we do it there, but it's not the end-all be-all. I think obviously the number one indicator that we need to move deeper is the drill results and how they sit underground. And you see repetition between Alchemist, Rainbow, and Pine Bay in terms of how this allows it to sit vertical plunge, dipping about 82 degrees. And the same it holds true with what we're seeing at Descendant based upon the holes in the immediate area. So certainly geology, the geochemistry is going to aid us, and borehole EM, which is how we approach every exploration campaign.
What happens to the rest of the portfolio while you're working on Descendant? What are you doing on Ascendant? What's the company aiming to do in the next few months? Is it just work on Descendant, or are you trying to work up the rest of the portfolio as well?
Slowly work on Descendant. I mean, you hit widths like that are significant. By comparison, for example, Rainbow is sitting with an 8 meter thickness on the yellow zone, the orange lens. So by comparison, when you're getting 27 meters of massive sulfides, you're going to build tonnage a lot more quickly in a scenario like that. And that's going to be an area that is going to be immediate focus. I mean, it's been a focus for literally over a century to that end. Additionally, I didn't mention, it's certainly worth noting, the 4 lenses were cross-cut by dikes and sills, which is an event that occurs after the mineralizing event. You typically see these in these VMS systems. You see them certainly at 777 in Flin Flon, and really all the mines in Flin Flon, where the dikes and sills will come in and cross-cut the mineralization after the fact. So that's what's separating the 4 different lenses. So based upon our interpretation of the geology and understanding of these systems, we do believe that there's potential to come off hole on a step out, and for those dikes and sills to disappear per se, or kind of cease to exist, and you'll be left with one solid massive sulfide lens that could be 50 meters wide. And that's where you get big tonnage very, very quickly. For example, in a 100 meter block on our long section on Rainbow, you're looking at roughly 400,000 tons. And should this happen, and should we step out and get a 50 meter interval and one solid lens, you're going to be building 2 million tons in that same 100 by 100 meter block. So again, building tonnage much more significantly. In terms of where Rainbow sits already, within 90 meters of surface and is drilled out to the 900 meter level. In terms of our discovery hole depth on Descendants, similar to the discovery hole depth on 777, and there's potential that you could drift over from Rainbow over to Descendant at depth, which is a big benefit to have Rainbow there drilled out.
What's the horizontal distance?
You're 1,400 meters. And so they've done that over at, initially to produce at Callinex at 777. They drifted from the South Main head frame to get into that system originally. So it's certainly been done in Flin Flon.
Just remind me of the of the whole intersection. It was down at 1,300 meters, and what did you hit in terms of? Was it 67 meters? Just in terms of the numbers.
It was across 67 meters. The mineralized interval. There was 4 different lenses. As I mentioned, those 4 different lenses were broken up by those dikes and sills. And then we had varying degrees of mineralization. We had over 10.5 meters of 1.36% copper equivalent. That included 6.5 meters of 1.7% copper equivalent. There's another interval of another 7 meters of 1.7% copper equivalent. And just by comparison, it should be worth mentioning that our cutoff grade based upon the resource that we just put out at Pine Bay about a month and a half ago is 1.3% copper equivalent. And the grade distribution in the mineral distribution in this hole is similar to what you see at Rainbow, where you're going to get this sphalerite-rich and pyrite-rich portion of the VMS deposit. And when you follow that mineralization at depth, is where you hit the exceptional high grade that Rainbow is, become famous for, known for.
So just to, you were mentioning it at the beginning with the zinc and the gold being a distal part. So you're aiming to go 200 meters below to get more into the copper zone. That's the plan. That's the ambition.
Right, or depending on how big the system is, we're certainly working our way towards that.
Yeah, obviously the bigger the system, the more the zinc can run for.
Right, and the deeper this can run too. There is a potential that there's a fold limb equivalent on the Pine Bay horizon that we'll need more drilling to confirm, but certainly there's fold repeats, tight isoclinal folding on this growth fault corridor that's where you have these stacking these deposits. And right now we're just on one fold limb equivalent on the cabin horizon per se, but there's potential for descendant to come back around onto the Pine Bay horizon and host the Pine Bay deposit at depth.
So it could potentially be the same horizon as Pine Bay?
That's the interpretation we have, is that they are the same fold repeated horizon as Pine Bay, as Rainbow, as Odin, as Alchemist.
Okay.
Kind of like an accordion.
I think you mentioned one of your news releases, kind of some overturning, so you can get some kind of way up indications from the stockwork zones, kind of, which was the old top and the old bottom. Yeah, right. When you're drilling through that alteration system, you can certainly see tops and bottoms. When you come out of the cabin horizon, drilling from east to west, you'll go into an andesite flow, which is your shutdown marker unit, and then you'll go back into the Pine Bay horizon, and then you'll have the reverse sequence where you're going through the alteration system or zones on the other side of it. So yeah, you're absolutely right about that. It's almost as if the focus has shifted now to ongoing exploration of descendant. Everything else is on hold while you try and work out what you're dealing with here. Yeah, no, well, we said exploration can change on a single hole, and it's certainly been the case with descendant. We were always taking the mindset that we were going to follow up on the most significant interception on this exploration campaign, phase 1, and certainly weren't able to get to where we wanted to get on Alchemist or Odin in terms of drill platforms. So we'll certainly like to follow that up at some point in the winter, because we were only able to put one hole over at Alchemist that went to the north of the plunge line due to access to the trail after spring breakup. But based upon the drill intersection to add descendant, irrespective of what happened to Alchemist, you're certainly going to follow up on descendant again. This is an area of the property that was our initial focus of exploration in 2016, and this has been the subject to dozens of exploration companies historically going back to 1919. You've got to keep in mind, when we started exploring the property in 2014 with the renewed focus on Pine Bay, we digitized over 625 drill holes, and over 400 of them sat in this area of the property. And every one of those holes is a hole that's intended to find the big deposit. So again, there was a lot of people with well intentions, and we're very, very pleased by the fact that we were the company that's come in there and made this discovery, and see strong potential for it to expanding something very, very significant. And that's really principally by going deeper. Yeah, going deeper. Our discovery hole depth was 1,314 meters down hole. By comparison, the 777 discovery hole depth was 1,287 meters down hole, so we're at
30, 40 meters deeper downhole than 777. If you look at Lawler was discovered at over 800 meters downhole, and ultimately they're drilling at 2-kilometer depths on Lawler, and Lawler's very flat lie. And Rainbow was discovered at over 900 meters downhole, and you've seen what that's transitioned and turned into. So all the major modern discoveries in the camp's history have been discovered at depth, or they continue at depth. The only other discovery that I didn't mention is Trout Lake, which is over 20 million tons, and that was discovered near surface, but truly ballooned at depth, as many of these big systems do. So the focus, I think, for exploration overall in these mature mining camps, I think, truly on a global basis, is I think there's going to be a shift to going and drilling at depth, and there's going to be eventually an increased appetite just based upon necessity to do so. But again, we've never shied away from drilling a deep hole that can have big implications for the company, because if you don't take those shots, you're certainly never going to hit them, and you're never going to find what you're looking for when you understand these VMS systems in Flin Flon.
What's the work program look like now? Have you got a break? Are you still drilling? Tell me more about what happens between now and and the end of the year.
Well, we're still drilling, so we didn't stop drilling. We were drilling a deepening of a hole right now as we set up a collar location to give follow-up on Descendant. And when we have that available in the next, I'd say 5-6 days, we'll start collaring that deep parent hole at depth. But again, the program has not changed. We've just amended the program for another 5,000 meters on top of the 8,500 meters, and that's to follow up at Descendant at depth. And we have a high degree of confidence at the conclusion of this campaign that we'll be answering a lot of questions in terms of what this is going to turn into at depth. And that can then in turn relate to a big catalyst for our shareholders, the company, and where we're headed forward in the foreseeable future. Because based upon a successful 5,000 meter campaign here, I really do believe that you'll see us here for a number of years to come, delineating this as soon as possible. And it happened much more quickly in terms of tonnage based on those widths.
And how long is it going to take to do that, the next 5,000 meters? I mean, are we talking weeks or months here?
It's going to be months. The 1,600 meter parent hole, for example, assuming things don't deviate and all goes well, that hole alone will take 3 weeks, 3.5 weeks to drill. And that's assuming nothing happens with the drill rig. And then things will come more quickly after that, because once that parent hole's in, then you start setting a number of wedges to wedge up off of that.
Is it started to freeze there yet? I mean, are you effectively over the shoulder season and into colder weather now?
The colder weather comes pretty quick. I was just actually out there for that site visit I mentioned about 2 weeks ago, and it was still quite warm, got chilly in the evenings. So know that there's no ice on the water, but things will start firming up pretty quickly as we head into the fall months. Certainly. And
hopefully you'll get some results out before the end of the year. I mean, if we look at the parent hole, let's say, takes us to mid-October, and then wedging off that for a few weeks, and you might get some results back this year, or is that going to be too tight?
Certainly, we'd hope to get some results back this year. If we don't, though, I wouldn't bat an eye about it. Things do take time. I think it's just, you got to keep in mind, outside of just drilling a hole for 3.5-4 weeks, you've got to anticipate the assay turnaround time, which has been really quite cumbersome, if I was to be honest with you. So assay turnarounds have plagued us in a lot of ways, but you can also argue that they've helped us when they have been very slow. So in terms of timelines for assays, it'll be late November or more than likely in the new year.
Yeah.
Really depending on assay turnaround times.
Yeah. Okay.
We'll put out the news when we get it. Certainly, it's what we're in the business of doing. Just sometimes that's a bit late. It's just managing expectations around that as well.
And how's your cash position?
As of June 30th, we have $4.1 million in the treasury, and as I mentioned, we've been just drilling with one drill rig instead of two.
You want to reduce risk and increase your chances of success. So good. Presumably that means that you'll be looking to have success with this deeper hole, and at some point in the new year you'll have to think about the next round of financing?
Well, truly, I mean, I'm thinking about the next round of financing the day after we close the last round of financing. So I don't think as an exploration company that's ever anything that leaves our minds. So it's always managing around that, managing the markets around that. But we are very grateful for the support that we receive from our shareholder base, new and existing. And I certainly think demand will be there whenever we need to raise capital in the future. But we've got a long way ahead of us in terms of big catalysts that could truly transform the company from the company that we were at the beginning of the campaign. And that was always the focal point of exploration in 2023, was to build a significant volume, or I should mention a path to significant volume at Pine Bay after publishing the maiden resource, which we did publish that maiden resource about a month and a half ago at the 5.7 million tons on Pine Bay, 4.7 million at Rainbow over 3% copper, and then the million tons at the Pine Bay deposit. That's a parallel deposit adjacent to it.
Good. Well, good luck with the next drill hole at Descendant. It'd be obviously great if you can get a good thickness of perhaps even more copper-rich material. That's all the good stuff.
Yeah, no, certainly. I mean, even the Rainbow's discovery hole seemed modest. A lot of people looked at it at 900 meters vertical depth, and it's emerged to be one of the most significant resources to be published in the history of Flin Flon. And we're just as pleased with this discovery hole, those 4 lenses that we've discovered, and have confidence that it too can grow into something special. So we're excited to get the drills turning on step outs and report them back to the market as soon as possible.
Good. Well, I look forward to catching up with you at some point in the future. Max, thank you very much.
Likewise.